music, dance, theater, it's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
Hello, and welcome to On the Aisle with me, Tom Alvarez. My guests today are actor, producer, director Brian Vincent and actor, singer, producer Heather Spore. They created an indie film titled Make Me Famous. Directed and edited by Brian in his feature directorial debut and produced by Heather, their film is about the rise and fall of the East Village art scene in New York City in the 1980s. Through the unlikely lens of little-known neo-expressionist painter Edward Brezinski. The film premiered at the New York Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Film Festival on October 17, 2021. Join me now as I go on the aisle with Brian and Heather.
Have you ever covered a carpet stain with a rug, ignored a leaky faucet, pretended your half-painted living room is supposed to look like that? Well, you're not alone. We've all got unfinished home projects. But there's an easier way. Thumbtack is the app that makes it easier to care for your home. Pull out your phone and in just a few taps, search, chat, and book highly rated pros right in your neighborhood. Download Thumbtack and start caring for your home the easier way.
Achieving a gorgeous grin from home isn't a total mystery with Bite Clear aligners. Just don't be surprised if all of your sleuthing friends start asking, "What's your secret?" Begin by ordering your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95. Bite Clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer flexible financing, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Welcome, Brian and Heather, to my podcast.
Tom, we're so thankful to be here. It's great to be on.
It's my pleasure, indeed. Today, I'm talking with you by Zoom, and I see some lovely art in the background. So where are you exactly so we can let our listeners know?
We are in New York City, and we could see Central Park from our apartment. We have a painting behind us that's made by Edward Brezinski and another
oh my goodness
artist that's in the movie. And we were given this painting actually to inspire us while we made the movie. And
wow,
what you see here is it's a wonderful combination of a couple of different schools of art. And Edward Brezinski added the words on it, but the other artist drew this incredible Buddhist face. And then the Edward Brezinski, who's the subject of our film, he added the color to it and the poetry. And the poetry, I think it says, genius is being able to materialize thoughts before they disappear is the implication.
Okay, well, for those who have no idea who he is, let's start at the beginning. And of course, that particular painting and the person you interviewed about that painting really jumped out at me. And so it's interesting that you have it in your own apartment behind you. So let's start from the beginning, if you will.
Edward Brezinski is not a name that many know. They do now because the movie has helped revive interest in his work. He now has a wiki that's devoted just to him. But when we started this movie, there was certainly no wiki. There was very little known about him. And Heather and I are both in the performing arts. I'm an actor. Heather's an actress. She was on Broadway and Wicked for many years. And I'm an actor. I like to create things. And I thought, boy, it'd be great to make a project about the 1980s art scene. Here in New York in the 1980s, New York was broke in the early 80s. And a lot of these young people that were highly trained in making art, they arrived to a city that really wasn't able to accommodate them professionally. They also weren't very interested in the artwork that was being shown in the 80s in galleries. Like most of the artwork that was really hip and making money had to do with earthworks and sort of strange art, that abstraction, to the point where the young people thought, well, this is boring. So they because it was cheap, they were able to rent storefront studios, and they would put on their own shows. And that's where also the performers jumped in. So you'd have musicians and actors and painters all performing all together. And it turned out that that got a whole lot of attention. And some very famous musicians came out of that, like Madonna and Blondie. But then some of the world's most famous artists now have come out of that. And for instance, Basquiat, Jean-Michel Basquiat, is now the #1 selling painter in the world. And so I guess you could say Van Gogh would be his rival, but I mean, that tells you a lot.
Yes.
Brzezinski was there. He was with these in this crew, but he didn't get famous. And so I stumbled across his work. I thought, this is a really interesting angle. What if we researched someone who didn't get famous and find out why? And I thought we were making a play. And then along the way, we came across this incredible film and archival film. And that's when we realized we had a movie.
And a quirky one it is. I just finished it last night. So let's back up further, though. Why are you and I talking about this film on my podcast, based in Indianapolis?
Well, that's because we're about to have our Indianapolis premiere.
And by the way, this will be after the fact, unfortunately, because this will drop probably sometime in June.
Yes, we will have had our premiere May 17th at the Can Cinema, and we'll have been there for a Q&A session, and we hope to have met lots of you to kind of celebrate, the unsung art heroes of the world.
How is it that the two of you found each other? Can, the not-for-profit, for those listening who don't know what Can or what Can is, it's an independent film house located in the Windsor Park neighborhood of Indianapolis. It's on the east side, and it's been in operation since when COVID started. Good timing, right? But in any case, it's just a really wonderful space, multi-screens, I believe. There's also a coffee shop called Amelia's, which you guys will probably visit. And the neighborhood is in a transformation. Gentrification is a bad word to some people, but for all intents and purposes, it's that. A lot of beautiful 100-year-old homes and such. So that's where you're going to be. And I just talked with the executive director today, and this will be one of a number of films that they like to bring to Can, independent films, art films such as yours. But how did they find you and vice versa?
Well, we reached out to them because we're going to be working on a project in Indianapolis. And we thought, let's see if we can try to get our film screening in that area while we're there. Because we find that if we go and support the local cinemas with our presence and being there to support the film, then it helps them kind of get the word out. This is a special event. And so we try to do that as often as we can. And the Can, it's a local cinema that supports indie film. And they show some really eclectic things there. And just the fact that they've programmed us, we don't have a distributor on board, but we've been very successfully distributing our film in domestic theaters across the United States and Canada, and actually in 9 countries, 43 cities. So the Can has kind of taken a chance on an independent film, but we've kind of proven our stripes a little bit with the press. We've gotten 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And
how long have you played the theater in New York City where the film is currently being shown?
We've been screening in New York City coming up on 1 full year. So we've
Mm-hmm.
been kind of this anomaly success story where we do, instead of trying to play a lot of times in 1 week, we kind of work with the theaters. And some of the theaters in New York played us on a regular basis when we
Oh,
started.
so it's not just one theater, it's several.
Several theaters, yeah.
Okay. What
And
are they? Which are they? What are their names?
well, we are playing right now at the new Plaza Cinema, which is right up near Lincoln Center on the Upper West Side.
Uh-huh. I know it well, yeah.
Yes. And
And
we are also playing at the Nighthawk Cinema in Prospect Park, which is this beautiful, very large art house cinema in Brooklyn, in New York.
okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how many people will have seen it by now? Any idea?
Ooh,
I
that's a good
would
question.
put it in the thousands,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the great thing about like this movie. We weren't sure that it was going to be playing in theaters when we were making it. We thought we were going to be shown in museums. In fact,
Wow.
when we made the movie and completed it, we were hoping that the Museum of Modern Art was going to show it because they were very interested in it. So I was only ever dreaming of all of us sitting, all the artists and all the collectors,
Mm-hmm.
everybody sitting in a screening at MoMA. And so
Right.
I think that drove the continuity of the movie to be very art friendly, art history
Yes.
friendly. And so it's been a real surprise to us that
Well,
it's
no surprise to me because I know that not knowing much about it, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I just love the fact that the East Village of that time period was a character in the film.
yes, thank
I mean, you really captured that period too. I was there, I've never lived in New York, but I've always had friends there, family who've lived there. And so I've seen it through their eyes. And I remember the time when I was just a young man in that time period in the mid 80s. And I went to the Mud Club, for instance. And I had friends who dressed like Madonna and it was just a really, it was some of my fondest memories that are of that time, and you captured that so beautifully. So
thank
that's how I saw it through that lens of my own experience, and of course the art. I mean, well, it's a lot to talk about. As you know, Brian, you and I have had a brief conversation. Just let the audience know. One of the reasons I wanted you and Heather on was because we share something in common in that I used to regularly make documentary films, and now I'm about to do another one, but that's for another show. So I have a deep affinity for the journey that you two were on. And another reason that I was drawn to the film and then to see it, I really had a deep appreciation for the work that you did, just to get that out of the way.
Thank
well,
you.
your movie, James Dean and Me, is something I've probably watched 3 or 4 times. And it's beautiful. And I love the interviews that you did, and I love the structure of your movie. And the great thing about documentaries is that they allow filmmakers to be an auteur in a way that larger films probably don't allow until you've really proven yourself. And so when you watch a documentary like the one you made, it gives you a view into who Tom is too. And the same
Well,
this
that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, well, that I noticed that because we've devoted so much time to making this documentary that you eventually you start looking around at all the other documentaries in the world and you start thinking about um how come some of these come across in a way that no movies ever do. And I think it's because the personality of the person making it, the heart of the person, the soul of the person really comes through in a documentary, that especially one where people devote so much energy into something that they care a lot about. And so,
The thing that we share in common is that in both of our films there was no narrator, and that our interviewees were the storytellers. And when in brainstorming with my collaborators on that, there was quite a discussion about that. And there were some who were against it. Others thought we should have a traditional neighborhood narrative, but that's what we called it, James Dean and me. We wanted our subjects to tell the story,
Yes.
and not a Peter Coyote or, a traditional broadcast kind of person. And so I love that way. And unlike our film, though, you two were in it, which I really appreciate saying. And now I'm thinking, well, shucks, I should have made some cameos myself, but I was behind the camera most of the time. As the unseen interviewer, I did not want it anyway.
No, well, I'll go off that because people like that now, but when when you're making James Dean and me, you were also dealing with a lot of people who say, oh, well, this is what a documentary should be, and this is what it should be, and it should always be fly on the wall, and you shouldn't participate or have anything but an objective feeling about your subject. And I think all that's out the wall. It's not the way it is now. In our case, though, we joined the fun for a couple of reasons that we didn't expect. Our documentary, it turned out that Edward Brezinski had a mystery that we needed to solve, and we actually had to go on the ground, and we ended up in.
Oh, I saw, yeah,
to sort of figure it out. The other aspect of it that I had,
it was like a true crime story. I loved it.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes it, I think, so successful outside of just the art world. But the thing is that when we got dragged in a little bit too, because artists are performers by nature. And I had thought of that when we first started making the movie. Well, they're artists, so they can hold the camera and everything. And some of them could. And for instance, you'd interview them and they'd be very entertaining, but they're not actors. And so sometimes people, they would be wonderful to interview in person, but once you turn on three cameras, they shrink up and so I would come and sit with them, or we'd make allowances. So these kind of things, I think, though, are generally a little more accepted now. And I personally don't like a narrative over which you don't have, like you said in your document, a narration, because I think that the people that you're interviewing, they're the ones that were there. They're the ones that know the most, and that you can play a different kind of structure that way. So we do hope to bring that into the next project that we're working on. Like Heather said, it's about an Indiana artist, and we're going to be back around, and hopefully we'll be able to interview you again and be able to talk about who that is. But Edward Brezinski was also a Midwestern person. So maybe people from Indiana could also get that feeling of
absolutely.
Going to New York and trying to make it,
Oh, well, I have so many questions just about that, all of these artists and where they came from. And, chances are a lot of those folks came from the Midwest to escape the Midwest. Heather, tell me about your role in this project. Well, you're collaborators, okay? So was it an equal split, or how'd your collaboration work? And you're also married, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
We are married, and perhaps that's how I got roped into the collaboration. But I'm an actress. I spent about 10 plus years on Broadway in a show called Wicked.
Oh, I know it well. As a reviewer, I've seen it 5 times at least.
Well,
Couple on Broadway, touring companies. So I know it quite well. What did you play?
I was in the ensemble, and I was an understudy for Glinda. So every once in a while, I got to be the lead. I also did a show that was very long running.
I can't get you to sing Popular for me right now, right?
Popular. You're gonna be popular.
Oh, you got that voice. Okay.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Okay.
But I was also in the closing company of the Fantastics, which ran for 43 years in New York.
Oh my God, you were in that?
Yes.
That is one of my favorites.
Oh, it's such a good.
And where was it? That famous little house? What was it called?
The famous little theater was the Sullivan Street Theater.
There you go. Oh my goodness.
So I was very lucky in my career.
Remind me of that character. Remind me of that character's name again.
Oh, Louisa.
Louisa, sweet Louisa. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So,
That's my background. I come from theater, which oftentimes, just to give your listeners an insight on the kind of work you have to do as an actor in New York, is you're basically the administrator and the talent. As an actor, you're doing lots of logistics and
oh yeah.
finagling times and how to do your taxes and all kinds of different things.
You have to be
So
your own, you have to be an entrepreneur too to promote
yes,
yourself and all that
yes.
stuff.
If you're going to be successful, you have to do all of the roles. And so that, unbeknownst to me, made me very kind of qualified to be a producer, because
Yeah.
the producer will be the logistics person of a team. And so we're very lucky that Brian is kind of a broad strokes creative visionary, and I am kind of a logistical visionary.
So
So
you've
we,
got contrasting, but you've got both of you have skill sets
yeah,
that combined are very potent, it sounds like. Yeah. Well, I can
yes.
see it in your work. So where did you two meet and how long ago?
Heather and I were neighbors in Hell's Kitchen, and I saw her off to auditions for soap operas and plays and things, and I was very interested. I saw her at one point gardening in a tree well, and that I instantly developed interest in horticulture at that moment. And so
Did you stalk her? Is that what happened?
well, the thing is, if you ask, if you date your neighbor, you better hope it works. So I worked
Oh,
at
I
my,
see. Okay.
there were probably about 5 guys trying to hand her
Shovel.
shovel or so, right? But I somehow I got your attention, and we went out, and I
And
think,
what year was that?
well, this would have been around
2003.
2003 or so, yeah. And she
Okay.
auditioning for Wicked, and I think it was your 13th callback, right? And
Oh, my
so
goodness.
I worked with her on her audition, and she got it. Now that had nothing to do with me, but it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt to get more dates.
What Brian isn't telling everyone is that he is also an actor, and he went to the finest theater school in New York called Juilliard.
Oh,
And
yes.
so I was happy that he was coaching me for my Wicked callback.
Yeah. And where did you both hail from? Where do you hail from, both of you?
I'm from Missouri/Kansas. I'm from both sides of Kansas City. My parents moved around a lot. And Heather.
And I grew up in Texas.
Okay, where in Texas?
Small town people. I am from kind of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, this little area called Keller, which is
Oh, wow.
outside of Fort
What
Worth.
happened to your draw?
Well, if you give me a cocktail, I'll go right back there.
Did New York knock it out of you?
Well,
Accent?
you have to be able to bring it back, but
Right.
you definitely you have to have a few dialects under your
Yeah. I happen to love it because all my people are from San Antonio.
Oh,
Oh,
love
yeah.
that. Yes.
And so, go
What
ahead.
people don't understand about New York is it is very much like a small town. It seems like this big city and it's hustling and bustling, but when you live in the same neighborhood for any length of time, it's very small town like. We don't have a Walmart. We just recently got a Target in the neighborhoods.
So are you on the west side, did you say? Or
We started in Hell's Kitchen, which is kind of below Central Park on the west side. And we have ended up on the Upper East Side on the
Okay.
upper.
Oh, wow. So Hell's Kitchen, for those who are listening, that's near the Broadway district, correct?
Yes,
Correct.
that'd been where all the actors and over the years, it seems like, have lived. I think Brando lived on our street at one point on
A
49.
lot of tourist hotels there. I stayed in one last time I was there. So the Upper East Side, huh? Well, that's pretty cool.
Yes.
Well,
Well, the thing about New York is that you go to local businesses, you go to the local
Of
grocery,
course.
the local bodega, you get to know the owners. You see the same people going back and forth. You say hello.
Sure.
you say hello to your neighbors, and you stop and chat just like you do in the Midwest. So
Yeah. Are you anywhere near Lexington?
we are
Yeah.
somewhat near Lexington. Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit
Okay.
closer to
We're
Madison.
we're more west than that, but we're
Okay.
close to Central Park. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's very nice where we are now. But we did our time in Hell's Kitchen. That was 20 years or so. I think we lived there.
Yeah. And so total, how many years have you been in New York City?
Well, I've been here since I was 19 when I came to school, and so
Wow. Okay.
30 years or
And
so.
never went back to Missouri, huh?
Well, I do. I go visit there,
Yeah,
and
of course.
we went and screened the movie in at the
The Nelson Atkins
Nelson
Museum of
Atkins
Art.
That
Museum.
must have been a thrill to take your work back to your home, right?
Totally,
We're
absolutely.
going back.
And we're playing again, yes. And mid-July we'll be back there playing at a different theater. So we're very
Well, filmmaker to filmmaker, I have to tell you, I really, and I can say this with authority, knowing what it takes to produce
Mhm.
a 90-minute, mine was like an hour. It was built for TLC network, and they carved out time for commercials. So it's like 43 minutes. I mean, and it just zooms by, as you know, but
Absolutely.
watching yours, the pace was amazing for that length, but the pace was such that I couldn't take my eyes off of it. It was mostly because of the editing was extraordinary. A lot of quick edits,
Thank you.
a lot of I could not believe your content. And I thought, wow, these people work their ass off. I can't imagine the research that they had to do. And of
Yeah,
course, when I saw in your credits and all the licensing stuff that you had to do, all those museums, all the folks you had on camera, how long did it take you to produce this thing?
well, it took us. I started researching it in 2012. We finished it at 2020.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, 8 years pales against my paltry 5, but still, you know.
Well, it depends on what you're doing in those years, I guess. But yours has reached more eyes than ours has so far. But it's a the thing is that Heather and I set out thinking, well, we'll do this many interviews, and then you realize along the way, wait a minute, we're not done. And then you got to figure more stuff out. And the next thing you know,
Yeah.
more stuff comes up, and
Oh yeah.
but it did allow for the editing to develop over time. So
Yeah. Okay. So how long was the actual production process? Was it over time?
We started shooting 2015,
right.
Mhm.
and we stopped. We started post-production right around when COVID hit New York in 2020.
20, I remember that.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
yeah, good 5 years of actual shooting. This
Okay.
was kind of paid for thanks to the wonderful salary that Broadway offers. So we were able
I
to
wondered about your funding. Yeah.
yeah, we were able to save up and, kind of consolidate shooting. In New York, we had two main blocks of shooting, several days each. And then we, of course, went all over the world. We went to Berlin, we went to the Côte d'Azur, we went to Ireland. And so all those were different blocks of shooting. So it wasn't
Mhm.
a continuous,
Yeah.
amount, but
And
there
did you raise money all the way through the process?
No, we didn't do crowdfunding or anything like that, but we had a few people give us small amounts of money, and then we won a grant from the New York State Council for the Arts, which was helpful at the time. They gave larger grants than they do now.
And then,
Um,
as you said, you financed partly out of your own pockets.
oh
Okay.
yeah,
this was a passion project.
we
So are you willing to share kind of what your budget was for that film
it,
overall?
it reached about 100 and what 30 or something
No,
like
it
that.
was more than that, love.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
Pretty
yeah.
expensive
It
to
adds
make a
up.
film, and
Well,
what
they
we
say it's these days it's like 100 a finished minute. That sort of seems to be the market sort of standard or competitive, I'm
yeah,
told.
Well,
Yeah.
if you count in all the people we didn't pay that are,
Yeah.
it's about 400,000.
Okay, I get it. Oh yeah. Yeah, with all
Oftentimes, we didn't
the
spend that
in-kind
much.
stuff. So,
Yes.
Well,
yeah, I could go on and on about, your creative approach too. What I really loved is tell me about your set. And by the way, but even before that, who owns the rights to all of his stuff now? Who owns his estate? Does he have an estate? Or I mean, who owns all that? Or did you get it from collectors or what? Tell me all about that.
his family has been very nice throughout. You have to keep in mind that Edward, his paintings weren't selling, when we started. Now,
Oh yeah.
now there's a lot of interest in Edward Brezinski artwork now. So they've been very sweet throughout that the intellectual property of it and everything, they signed a release and they said, go ahead and make this movie. So there are collectors of Brzezinski artwork out there that are very happy, like Lenny Kisco, who's in the movie. He's a waiter who basically spent
Yes.
all of his money that he made as a waiter, on buying Edward Brzezinski artwork. And so he had it stored in this incredible railroad apartment, and that's what originally got me interested, was that I went to go see this work, and it wasn't just the work, it was the way Lenny was about talking about Edward
Oh
Brzezinski,
yeah.
the mystery he was. And so, the movie is intended not really to lift up Brzezinski necessarily as one of the great missed artists of his time, but instead it's really an opportunity to give the audience the feeling of what it's like to be an artist, a striving artist in the 1980s. And
Yes.
so how people feel about his art, or, if there becomes a market for his art and all that, that's all just gravy. It is whatever it is.
So I
It,
take it that the family has his estate and they will benefit from this, which is a good thing.
well, they might, if, yeah, Heather, go ahead.
It's possible that they would benefit from it. The thing is, it would be up to them to kind of start a merchandising type
Got
of
it.
thing. And I'm not sure they're interested in that right now. So,
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I find it, I find it interesting that you are making him famous, and it follows that because based on its exposure, and it sounds like you'll continue to expose him, that it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. That the irony of it does not escape me or most people. It's like, oh my God, it's just, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it makes you wonder about paranormal connections with something like this.
Oh
I,
gosh.
I chose Brzezinski without knowing that he had done something that almost, okay, maybe none of the other artists
Mhm.
19 early 1980s did, and that's make sure that you're on video. Edward had worked with this great videographer, Jim C is his name, and Jim C lived in Brzezinski's apartment, and they decided to film the comings and goings of his gallery shows on the fifth floor walk up across from a men's shelter. And in this video, you'll see Basquiat stop by, Keith Haring ducks in, but they're in the background. In the
Oh my goodness. Yes.
foreground
No,
are
yeah.
all these unfamous people, and yet it's
The
just
video the video content that you have is just extraordinary. None of that missed my eye. I mean, I couldn't believe it.
I know.
As a documentary filmmaker, I have to tell on myself, admit to you that I'm trained to do research. I've been doing it for so long that I know what it's like when you're looking for a piece of footage. And I've like back in the days when in television, we did 16 millimeter film. I had days where we were looking in the wastebasket for a piece of film that we'd thrown out. And we needed it for this segment. I got in the habit of documenting my life and everybody's life around me for years. And I haven't done that like I used to do, but so I have a deep appreciation I did it less for ego, but I did it more because as a historian, I feel like you guys are historians now. I felt it was, it's important to preserve our history, everyone's history. Because
Yes.
you never know when someone's going to find it useful in the future. You know, the researchers who go through with the white gloves, who go through all the stuff in museums and whatever. So did you find that you came to have a deep appreciation for research and
Absolutely.
preservation?
Yes, yes. And Tom, it's something that all three of us share. You know, you're an actor, and a lot of
Oh, yeah.
times people think, well, actors are selfish, right? And they think about themselves a lot. Well, they don't all. And in fact, at Juilliard, they encouraged us to find characters, you know, to really explore and to really look not just into who the people were, but what was the time period and all that.
Mhm.
And so it is a somewhat natural fit, I guess, to be interested and fascinated by not just characters, but history itself. And so it has given us that appreciation and it's given us some skills. And that's why we want to apply them into bringing unique perspectives into the work that we bring into the future. I like that the next thing we're working on is someone who's very famous, but we want to try to bring out some perspective on it that hasn't been thought of yet. And we
Mhm.
think we can do that because we're sitting outside of it so far. And that was true with the 1980s art scene. Heather and I didn't have anything to do with it, but we sat outside of it. And so when we were doing our research with all these artists, a lot of times they were very skeptical. They say, well, you weren't there. So how would you know? Well, you know, if you do enough research, you can feel like you're there. I mean, Doris Kearns Goodwin, if you read her
Mhm.
Abraham Lincoln, she wasn't there.
Well, I wasn't there either, but I mean, my first memory was as a young child watching Rebel Without a Cause on my parents' black and white TV, and it changed my life, you
Mhm.
know. So about Edward himself, boy, there's some things that jumped out at me. We shared a couple things. Okay, I'm a gay man, but I'm also a recovering alcoholic. And what struck me about the film is that, you know, the way you touched upon his addiction, you know, it was part of the story. But I have to tell you, it really broke my heart that he was very sick, you know, ultimately. He was sick, he was addicted, and the way he behaved in public, you know, all of that. It was all of his warts, you know. And I felt a great empathy and sympathy for him because of what he was going through. And, you know, that was part, whether he acknowledged it, he would never have admitted to the reason for his lack of success was his alcoholism. Everyone was like, dude, no wonder you're not famous because you're messed up all the time. And then I wondered, is there a reason why you didn't go into any kind of depth, or maybe you did, I missed it, about his sexuality? You know, when did he come out? Any of that kind? Why did you choose not to include some more discussion about that from his friends or whatever? Was that a torture for him, or was he totally out, or what was the story?
Edward was always very proud gay man, and you know, he's from Michigan. He's a big guy. He's a big guy, and if you wanted to cross him, he would fight you.
Oh,
He wasn't a shrinking violet by any stretch of the imagination. Now, when I researched Edward, you know, realizing he's gay and all that, I just thought, okay, we'll treat it like, you know, the fact that Edward's gay, how much did that affect his work and all this other stuff? Well, Edward was one of those people, and I would think James Dean might be similar in this sense. He was completely devoted to his craft, and he didn't have long-term boyfriends that we
uh-huh.
ever came across. And that's
Yeah, I
something
wondered about that. There was no mention of such a creature. Yeah.
there was, because as far as I knew, there wasn't such a creature, although we did hear about one of his boyfriends passing away of AIDS, but I could never get that down. You know, some of the research, no matter how much you do, you
Got it.
can't get to it.
Yeah, I guess I expected something like documentaries about Andy Warhol. His boyfriends were always part of the story, his story. But it sounds like he didn't care to let others define himself as a gay man, a gay artist. He wanted to be an artist who happened to be gay. So in a way, he was pretty comfortable in his own skin, would you say?
I think so, and he made other people comfortable around him about
Okay, it
that.
wasn't it just wasn't that big of a deal.
It was a group too where being gay was probably the norm. You know,
Okay.
at least the group that he hung out with. Like Eric Bogosian, I said, well, Eric, can you tell me, Brzezinski and this? And he's like, well, when you're in your 20s, you're trying to date and all this stuff. So,
Yeah.
there's Edward, most of what you're seeing of him in the 80s is him in his 20s.
Yeah.
So also, I think there's this movie premiered at the LGBTQ Film Festival in New York.
I
And
saw that. Yeah.
yeah, so we were actually turned down by every major festival in New York except for the New Fest, which saved us because this film, it could not have been premiered outside of New York. And so I think what's happened with a lot of the film festivals is very difficult to get, especially your first movie, into like some of these major festivals. But New Fest launched Edward into the stratosphere. So we got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes right out of the gate with Hollywood Reporter and all these other things. So the fact that Edward was gay basically saved
Got
this.
it. I get it. I
So
get
you
it.
have
How
to
that that's ironic. It's ironic, isn't it? Just
Oh,
really.
totally.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
scene that Edward was a part of was kind of creative, in opposition of the traditional art world that was
Yes.
in New York in the 80s. There was a lot of money that was coming into real estate, the stock market and whatnot. And the art scene was booming in Soho. That's where all the galleries were. And this group of artists decided, because of they wanted to create their own kind of scene where they could be a part of. It's almost like Brian said, we weren't invited to some of these major film festivals. We went our own way in a different way. And that's what these artists did. They were not invited into Soho, and they created their own scene in their neighborhood. And they all became gallerists and
I love this. I didn't realize that they also showed each other. They in their own spaces. Yeah, that's how they created this ecosystem of them supporting each other that way.
it was very
Tell me
collaborative.
one thing I'm still unclear of. So educate me. I thought that I kind of figured this out, but I thought Andy Warhol and his factory group represented the outliers, but he was in fact considered establishment by Edward and his friends.
This entire group here would have seen Andy as their leader, their godfather, and Andy Warhol will have come to see their shows. He was very, very close friends with Keith Haring and Kenny Scharf, and of course Basquiat. I mean, they collaborated together. But Andy came from a time period too where he would go out at night. He wouldn't stay in, and
Sure.
so
I get it. Yeah, he had
what
money
people were
too.
doing. He had money.
And famous friends at Studio 54 and Bianca Jagger and her crew. And yeah, okay.
Oh, they absolutely adore Andy, and so
Yeah.
would have Edward. But they were scratching and trying to say, "Well, we want to be our own personality," and I think they found it.
Well, I love the fact that I don't know. I mean, I don't think they would have gone that far to live in squalor because they wanted to. It was all for show, but
yeah.
I mean that whole thing about your photos of that neighborhood and the homeless shelter, and oh wow, it's just like just fascinating study. And to think that so many of those people like him came from the Midwest and were living that way, but it really captured like sort of the sense of community, which I love that. I identified with it a lot for so many reasons, but I love the fact that the visuals of all the art itself, that's another character in the movie, all that art, I was just like, it never ended, I could see all the work that took for you to do all that. The content was amazing. Did you have to hire someone to take care of all the working with the estates and the rights and all that?
That
was you? Oh my God.
So when we're talking indie film, we're not talking, Neon or A24. This is real indie film, Brian and I, and a few people that we hire along the way, but the majority of the work was done by Brian and I. And so while Brian was, getting interviews together and working on rough edits, I was doing all of the clearances.
You
And
were on
so
the phone and emailing, and
I was emailing backstage at Wicked, still working.
Heather, it's mind-blowing. I know what it takes, the administrative part of doing a film. It's mind-boggling what I could see that you had to do. It's like, when did they sleep?
Well, it was a lot of over 150 artists that we have works from in the film. A lot of other ones that were fair use, that we worked with a fair use lawyer to utilize some works. But Brian was really kind of adamant about trying to reach out directly to all of the artists and to get their permission for the works, because even if it was something we could use via the fair use doctrine and not pay them, Brian was like, but if we include them in our process now, they will come along with us for the ride. And
and if you wanted to represent yourself as artists too,
yes,
you had to maintain some integrity about that.
yes.
If you're in fact going to showcase artists, you can't just I get that. So did you develop a relationship? Are they all friends or acquaintances? Are they still in your lives or no?
Yes, the many of them are very close friends now, and we've lost 5 of them since we met,
Oh,
unfortunately. 5 of them have died. And so yeah, every day we've remained friends with many of them.
and I don't know, I think you'll be interested in the fact that the James Dean film I did, I was just thinking about it today. Sometimes I do have like a pinch me moment. It's like, I can't believe I pulled that off. Like from the small office in Indianapolis, what cell phones just came into existence. There was AOL email where I had to wait forever to get a phone connection. And here I was calling Dennis Hopper's people or Eartha Kitt's people. And they're all dead now. All these people like you that I met and touched history with, they're all gone now. And I'm just like so grateful. And I'm sure you are too. You've touched history, but you had a connection with these people too. So you're part of that history now. Did it ever occur to you?
Yes, it has. Being outside of the art world, I think really a lot of people really told us everything that was on their mind, maybe more than they would have if I was.
Isn't that a gift though, to have that?
It is, and it's something that you earn, and you know this from your doc, because it's not something people just hand to you. I could go over all the stories about how I had to earn the trust. Like I won't go over too many, but for instance, Anina Nosé, who discovered Basquiat and was his first major gallerist, one of the most interesting women in the world. Well, I called her and I said, I'm wondering if you might remember Edward Brezinski, the painter. And she said, well, I do, but what do you know? And I was like, what do you mean? What do I know? And so she started grilling me about art.
I love it.
She asked me to go read several books, and which I did before I could come back and talk to her again. So these people are real smart people.
I love that. Well, they're the keepers of the flame. They want to make sure that you're honest and that you're going to do justice to their whoever. Wow. Well, it's such a joy to talk with you, particularly this isn't about me, but I would like our listeners to know that I just briefly want to touch on my new documentary. I'm returning to the fold to join my colleagues here, and I am producing a documentary on a young man. His stage name was River James, and I only knew him for 4 months. And someone sent me it was like right out of film. Someone sent me text saying, "Oh my God, you got to hear this young man. I discovered him, or I heard him in a restaurant singing, and I approached him and found out that he was a country western singer." And fast forward, she sent me a tape. I watched his YouTube, and oh my God, this guy, he's got the it factor. He's got it. He's the whole package. So we quickly became friends in the process of I told him I wanted to help him launch a professional career. He'd been playing around town, Indianapolis. So the sad news is, though, after 4 months of our friendship, he died of an inoperable brain tumor. And I had an intention, never said this directly to him, but kid, I'm going to make you a star. That was my intention. And now I'm going to get to do it. And like you, I'm hoping that this kid, River, he was a kid. He was like a nephew to me. I'm 76, so he really was like a lot of my I have great nephews. So River, his talent speaks for itself. So I want to tell his story and give him the fame that he wasn't about fame for him, it's about his work. He desperately wanted to share his songwriting. I mean, he was prolific, and I think he knew somehow that he only had a limited time. He lived his life intentionally every second. He was one of the most creative people I knew. So, like you, I just really drawn towards this person who didn't get the attention that he deserved in life. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens, what unfolds. But as you know, your film, it looks to me like it has a shelf life like mine does. It will live on for eons. It's like I don't see it running out of shelf life. Do you?
Well, inevitably there are millions of artists that don't get the fame. They don't get the recognition for their talent or their drive. And I think in New York, in Indianapolis, in Detroit, and you name a city, there are hundreds of artists who are, regardless of getting famous, they are creating. And we think there is a heroicism when you create art. And yeah, it's always great to sell a painting or work or, get a good review or whatever it is, have some sort of accolades. It's very helpful. But so many of artists don't get that opportunity. And we think this story is important because just like Edward Brezinski didn't get recognized in his day, there are hundreds of artists in Indiana who don't get recognized. And we think it's a very important thing to highlight people like that in our.
Exactly. We share the same beliefs and sentiments regarding my work in general is about the podcast that I have in this film. It's really a story about an artist trying to find their way creatively and an artist trying to share their story and through their music or their art. And this podcast is that's why I'm talking to you, even though you live in New York City. We have artists here that match the caliber of artists in LA or New York or bigger market. My point is that by doing my podcast, I want to celebrate national, regional, and local artists to make the point that there's good art everywhere.
Amen.
It just speaks to my mission. And so with that, I really look forward to following your work. And I definitely, when you're able to talk about it, my lips are sewn. Until you give me the word, then I can't wait to help you promote it. I'm really excited for you. I'm going to tease the audience with that. Okay, but you're going to be, how long will you be in town when you're here?
We're only in town for the weekend, but we hope to return. So if any of your listeners are enticed by Make Me Famous, the story of it, you can go to our website, makemefamousmovie.com, and we always update our screening schedule, and we do hope to return to Indianapolis in the area.
There was another theater we were talking.
Yeah, we are talking to other theaters in the area, so it's potentially that we could come
In
back.
other cities in Indiana as well? Have you thought about Fort Wayne, my hometown, or Bloomington? IU would be a great place for this.
Well, we're writing all those names down.
Yeah, IU Bloomington, they have a wonderful art museum and they would love this. IU is a large university and yeah, there are a lot of artists live there as such. But well, I'm going to say goodbye to you now, and what a pleasure it's been. So much to talk about.
Thank you, Tom. And I can't wait to hear more about River. So we've got to stay in touch about that. And I'm just so thrilled for you to begin that journey. It really is engaging.
Well, your film, again, when I finished it last night, it's like it just for me clarified why I need to do what I'm doing.
Thank you.
These stories have to be told. I feel like you did. There is some spirituality, and I know people think it's lame, but I don't care. I feel like I'm channeled. That River he's like, he's in his spirit lives through me, and this is what I have to do for him,
Yes.
And that's really exciting because I did feel James Dean's presence, by the way. All that time that I was working on the film, sometimes it was eerie. And actually, when I stepped away from it, I had to do it because, it really did become an obsession in a good way, not like creepy, but you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. And James Dean's charisma is so strong, but
I get to New York, at least I try to at least once a year to soak it up, and become inspired. And it's funny, I always find myself at the MoMA, he's got a piece there right now. Is that correct?
Well, he was shown at that show, which went on for quite a while, but he is in permanent collection in the Brooklyn Museum and a few other museums.
Well, we're going to have to meet up next time.
That'd be great. Yes, please look us up.
Oh my God, I've got to see that work behind you with my own eyes.
Yes.
It's one of my favorites. So, okay, well, take care, and we'll see you down the road.
We sure look forward to it.
See you down the road.
Thank you so much.
Our thanks go out to our media sponsor, Urban Times. Urban Times is a monthly news magazine which serves as the official neighborhood newsletter for 16 Indianapolis neighborhoods, offering news about development, arts and entertainment, and from the business community.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, and make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.